Everything starts at the Simpson house, where Marge checks the mail and realizes she has more bills to pay than messages, until she discovers a letter sent to Homer from the library. Upon opening it, Homer learns that he was warned for not returning a book a long time ago. Homer questions the truth of this accusation, but soon Lisa discovers the book, which is about classic children's stories. Upon seeing this, Homer remembers that he did indeed check that book out when Bart was born, as he planned to read it completely to his son. Bart asks him what happened so that he did not do it, so Homer blames the mechanical problems of his car. Faced with this, Lisa proposes to her father that he read the book right then. Homer reacts by making it clear that only he decides when he will read the pages of the book, but he immediately changes his mind and begins to narrate the stories. He proceeds to read Homer's Odyssey. Although at first he thinks it is about the van he rented in the past, Lisa explains that it is actually about an epic legend of ancient Greece, though Homer keeps remembering his old van. Bart interrupts to warn that, although he also misses the red van, it is something that happened 7 years ago, and they must continue with the story. Homer proceeds and transports us to the Greek world, where he is now Odysseus, who uses his cunning to move a large wooden horse to the gates of Troy. Once there, he simply knocks on the door and is received by King Flanders, who complains about not being able to go out to pick up his mail. Here, after cursing him in silence, Homer announces that all the Greeks have decided that the war should come to an end, and that, thanks to the torture of one of their soldiers, they discovered that the king is a fan of collecting giant wooden animals. Homer then offers him a giant horse, in the hope that it will be the first of his collection. Flanders looks at his kingdom, and, although he observes that he already owns 2 horses, he decides to accept the gift because it is Homer. In this way, the Trojans introduce the Greek horse into their castle. The story is interrupted because Homer starts laughing at the name of the Trojans. Having said that, he continues with the story, and we see that, at nightfall, after the Trojans were exhausted from celebrating the end of the war, the Greeks emerge from their hiding place inside the horse. Here, upon verifying that the Trojans are asleep, Mo orders them executed immediately. Thus, we see how the heads and swords of Troy fly, submerged in fire. The next day, with the kingdom of Troy destroyed, Odysseus informs his soldiers that now, finally, he will be able to return to Ithaca with his faithful wife Penelope. Faced with this, Apu warns him that he must not forget to thank the gods for his victory with an animal sacrifice, but Odysseus refuses to do so, as he considers it an act of barbarism. Furthermore, he orders his soldiers to execute the wounded, but this act of rebellion is seen by the gods from Olympus. Here, Zeus makes it clear that they will punish Odysseus for his offense. Immediately, Barney, the god of wine, uses one of Zeus's lightning bolts to attack, but without much aim, since he ends up destroying Atlantis completely, leaving the Greek group surprised at the unexpected and chaotic catastrophe. Zeus reprimands Barney for acting without caution, but Barney does the same, reminding him that in the past, he used to have more fun when he transformed into a cow and chased women. Zeus turns his attention to Poseidon and orders him to take care of Odysseus. Immediately, Poseidon blows with all his might, causing the clouds to take on his image to strike Odysseus's ship with a great gust of wind until they change their course across the entire ocean. Thus, the vessel ends up arriving at the Crazy Islands. However, what seems like bad news soon brings a smile to their faces as they are greeted by siren songs. Faced with this, the soldiers pile up at the end of the boat, hoping to grab the first siren they see. However, once they get close enough, they are horrified to discover that these sirens are Patty and Selma, ready to offer their hairy legs. Seeing this, the ugliness of the creatures breaks the glass of their glasses. Lenny is temporarily blinded, and the rest scream in horror. They immediately proceed to row with all their might back in the direction of Ithaca, desperately trying to escape the terrifying sight of the creatures. Meanwhile, in that kingdom, we see Penelope suffering from her husband's distance, making it clear she expects Odysseus to still maintain the physical fitness and silver hair worthy of a Targaryen, with which he left. However, because many years have already passed, Bart proposes to his mother and that she should start choosing another husband among the suitors. Here, Disco Stew enters the action, offering wine. Bart thinks he will get along with his mother. However, Disco Stew explains that he is actually interested in the boy envoy, which triggers repulsion. Later, when the boat is finally approaching Ithaca, we see that the gods act again and, with a shove, divert the ship once more. In this way, the vessel reaches the island of Circe. Here, they are greeted by a woman of the same name who introduces herself as a sorceress. She notices that the men are thirsty, so she offers them to drink from a cauldron surrounded by human skeletons. The soldiers decide to ignore this sign and proceed to quench their thirst, which immediately transforms them into various animals. Odysseus, the last to arrive at the island, finds pigs that look like his soldiers, but eats them anyway. Despite eating 4 pigs, Homer still claims he is hungry. Then, Circe reminds him that she warned him from the beginning that he had eaten his friends. Homer feigns surprise and decides the time has come to return home. However, Circe warns him that to do so, he must first cross the river Styx of Hades. With no options left, Homer enters the underworld, where he crosses the river of fire, while, all around him, the dead celebrate and dance to rock music. At the same time, in Ithaca, Penelope thanks the suitors for having waited 20 years before making a decision. Krusty scolds her, saying that because she waited so long, even Helen lost her beauty and has become quite an old woman. But then, Odysseus finally arrives at the location and, after asking Penelope for forgiveness for having taken so long, decides to take out the trash by attacking the suitors, whom he kills with a single blow. Having done this, Penelope asks her husband to tell her about his adventures after spending 20 years away from her, but Odysseus accuses her of suffocating him, so he decides to head to the local tavern to finally relax. After finishing the Greek story, Homer continues reading the book and begins narrating the life of Joan of Arc. In ancient France, a war against the English has been raging for over 100 years. In this setting, while the French Homer milks the cows, Bart grinds up ducks for breakfast. Marge joins them to ask where her daughter Lisa, who represents Joan of Arc, is located. Bart explains that she is busy conversing with her invisible friend, God. Far from there, on a hilltop, we see Joan praying while asking for blessings for her family. At this moment, the clouds open up, giving way to the voice of the Christian God himself. He explains that he chose Joan to lead the French army to victory against the English. Joan reminds him that she is just a young girl, but God makes it clear that he already knows that, since he has 3 eyes, and everything will be done according to his will. With no other choice, Joan explains the orders she received to her family. They do not believe her, and Bart mocks her, but God manifests again just to claim Lisa's dessert. Later, in the middle of the battle, we see the French throwing their own soldiers against the stone English walls without causing any damage at all. Here arrives Joan, proclaiming herself as the divine envoy to lead the French army. The soldiers laugh at her, but then Joan explains that her contribution will be modern ideas, such as placing rocks in the catapults instead of people. Joan attacks first, and even though at first the army watches her like a crazy person, they soon join the battle. Joan manages to reach the top of the wall, where she fights her way through, executing the English until they finally take the castle. Later, the King of France receives Joan of Arc and demands that she kneel before him. However, Joan refuses, as she reveals she has realized that he is not the true king. The real monarch is standing right next to him, as it is actually Milhouse, who was only testing her intelligence sent by God. Once on his throne, the monarch organizes a banquet in Joan's honor. Here, Milhouse reveals that she conquered his heart, but Joan rejects him gently, as they must remain friends. Krusty the Clown performs and mocks the king, reminding him that this is the 8th girl to reject him this week. However, Milhouse punishes him by sending him to die in boiling oil. The next day, back on the battlefield, when Lisa notices that the English are busy having tea, she orders an attack. The slaughter breaks out while Joan announces loudly that no one will be able to stop her since she was chosen by God. However, moments later, groundskeeper Willie captures her in a bag with complete ease. Thus, Joan of Arc is taken to an English court where she is accused of witchcraft, heresy, and having pushed an English soldier. Joan asks to call her only witness, the Almighty God. Immediately, the doors open and an elderly moleman emerges with a cane brimming with wisdom. However, he is only the man who opens a hatch to let in God's light. Here, the voice reveals that he did indeed order Joan to lead the French, but then Willie interrupts and reveals that it was the same God who also ordered him to lead the English toward ultimate victory. With no escape, God accepts that he spoke with both of them because he never thought they would find each other in the same place. And since he has no explanation, he decides to leave the court without giving any answer. Faced with this, the English blame everything on Joan of Arc and sentence her to die at the stake. Her family arrives at the scene. Marge pleads for her daughter's life, claiming that she is an innocent creature, while Homer, on the other hand, offers his son Bart as a sacrifice. The fire begins to spread, and even though Marge asks her daughter to accept the blame to be exempted from the punishment, we see that Joan fervently believes that God will protect her from the flames. However, the fire begins to ascend her body inexorably. The story is interrupted because Homer refuses to continue reading upon seeing the look of horror on Lisa's face. Immediately, Marge intervenes and takes hold of the book to invent a new ending where Sir Lancelot supposedly appeared on his steed and saved Joan of Arc. Then they got married and lived in a spaceship. To leave no trace of her lie, she ends up eating the page. Homer then continues with Hamlet. Everything starts in Denmark, where we meet Prince Bart, who, shortly after his father's death, is revisited by his father's ghost. Here, Homer's specter orders him to avenge his death because, while he was sleeping, he was murdered by his friend Mo, who poured poison into his ear. He did all of this to be able to marry Marge, and thus become the new king. Having said this, Homer leaves, passing through the walls, but he returns when he feels cold, since he advises his son to wear warm clothing. The next day, while the royals enjoy the court show led by Krusty, who mocks the Vikings, this causes the only Viking present to start a fire and kidnap 2 maidens. At the same time, Marge thanks Mo for the show, as she claims that only in this way can she forget her previous husband. The new king says he is very happy to be able to wear the old king's jewels and to sleep with his beautiful wife. Then, as the next act, Krusty warns that he will force those present to reveal a hidden secret. Mo becomes nervous, which unleashes interest from Bart, who understands that Mo will soon try to murder him. Krusty starts by asking for ideas for his improvisation. Then, Bart suggests that he should use the castle set, that his theme should be the usurpation of the throne, and that the main object should be ear poison. Guilt corrodes Mo's body, and he attempts to use the excuse that he has diarrhea to leave the room, but Marge forces him to sit down to witness the act. Thus, we see how Krusty plays Homer, who has already fallen asleep on his throne until his killer arrives and pours a whole jar of poison into his ear. Seeing this, Mo reacts instinctively, complaining that he did not use that much poison, and tries to divert attention by claiming that he was actually talking about simple perfume. With this vital information on the table, Bart understands absolutely that his father was poisoned. He then sneaks through the castle corridors at night to the royal chamber, where he attempts to decapitate the king, but he discovers, with surprise, that he is not present at that moment. Immediately, upon feeling something moving behind the curtains, Bart believes it is the king, so he thrusts his sword into the fabric without any mercy at all, ending Chief Wiggum's life. With his final moments of life, Wiggum asks his son Ralph to avenge his death. The next day, Ralph meets with the king to offer his services as an assassin against Bart. The king accepts, but reveals that, just in case, he put poison in the food, in the curtains, and in Carl and Lenny themselves. These two decide to celebrate by high-fiving, which results in their own immediate deaths. Moments later, Bart arrives at the scene, ready for the final duel, but when Ralph takes up his sword, the first thing he does is accidentally stab himself. Without further distractions, Bart takes the sword, corners the king, and executes him with one single, precise attack. Having done this, Bart prepares to celebrate life, but as he passes over a puddle of blood, he ends up slipping violently, and the impact of the fall takes his life. Marge, left completely alone in the castle and refusing to clean up the blood, decides to end her own life as well. Afterward, Homer closes the book, and although Bart claims the story is bad, Homer remembers it is high literature since it became Ghostbusters, sparking a family dance.